again, our goal here is going to be we have an API call. It's going to be to a random number. It's going to be to a random number API. You know, some of the time, well, let's just do the happy path case. It's going to return some JSON. We need to parse that JSON, parse on, and then we need to extract the value, and then we need to add it. We need to do it again, and we need to add the two values. So if we just construct this in a really simplistic way, let's make a couple functions. So we'll make a API call. API call function. So we're going to sort of pretend this is like a fetch API response. And all this is going to do is it's going to return some JSON. And JSON is a string. So we know what the shape of this data is going to be. Data ID ID is 1, type is random, attributes, sorry, these are all, it's not the same as JavaScript. Attributes, it's going to have a value. And the value is going to be some kind of random number. So let's get the random number here. Const output, random number equals, I can never remember a good way to generate. Thank you.
Small.
Okay, let's say it's between 0. Sorry, and what's the?
I can't actually remember this.
Okay, I always look it up.
But it returns.
Between, here we go, between 1 and 10.
The MDM is probably a better example.
I don't know, I think that's going to do the job.
It's like not going to be inclusive or something.
Yeah, you're probably right. Const rand equals. And let's just say.
Is that return string or string? What's that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, anytime you hit an API, it's going to give you string back. So
not
it's
just a straight object?
Nope. The web doesn't deal in objects. The web deals in strings. So it's your job to parse that stuff, and so it's going to give you a JSON formatted string, and then it's your job to parse it and extract the data out of it. So let's say max is 100. Max. Okay. Let's see. Equals. Let's make this a proper function. Actually, I'm just going to use the function syntax. Okay. All right, so let's finish our job here. Random number. Close out this. Close out that. Close out that. Does anybody know? Is anybody confused about what I'm trying to do?
Not what you're trying to do. Is this what is this syntax where you use the template literal?
Oh, you haven't seen a template literal? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's what I was asking. Actually.
Yes.
Was that
Let's talk about template literals. Yes. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Yeah. JavaScript ECMA version 2016 or 2015 has template literals. So. Yeah. So foo equals 12. Yeah, it's very similar to what Python has. Bar equals ABC. Console.log. Foo is foo. Oops, sorry, did it wrong. Foo. Bar is bar. You use backticks to do it. That's it. So when you want to replace things, you just, and that can be arbitrary JavaScript. So you can go, foo times 2, do stuff like that. Right. So all I'm trying to do here is basically have an API that returns, JSON. Essentially, what I'm doing is something like this. I'm doing a constant output equals, data colon ID is 1, type is random, attributes is value 12, and this is actually a list. Hopefully I did that right. Okay, so output is this object. This is a particular format of output. So I didn't pull this out of the air. This is called JSON API, if you're not familiar with it. There's a standard on this thing. You can go look it up. But it's how most REST API should be built. So there's other things besides data that can go into this, but data needs to be there. So this is the output that I want to come from the JSON API, but it's a string. So output.string, JSON.stringify. So that's the thing that I was trying to have the API generate. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. But I want to have it sticky in the actual random number. So we're just basically trying to simulate an API call. So we're going to hit API call. We're going to get back a string. So the first thing we do is hit the API call. We have the string. Next thing we want to do is parse it. So function, JSON parser. We're going to give it an input string. We're going to return JSON.parse input string. Okay. Then we want to pull out the value. So function get the value. And now, so this thing returns an actual object that we can do stuff with. So this is my server response object. And yeah, and in truth, I guess the other thing to talk about is an API call doesn't usually return just the payload. It returns a more complicated object. Usually you've got like a status is 200. You've got a body. You've got stuff like this. So there's more things in a JSON API response. So let's make it more realistic. So the JSON parser is only interested in the body. We want to parse that body. Maybe we also want to verify that we got a 200 status back. So let's just say, let's call this, well, let's take the whole response object. Let's verify that the response status is equal to 200, and we'll return the parsed response.body. Try to make it a little more realistic. All right, then we want to parse the actual response that we got. And, sorry, ESLint disable, no console. All right, so now we want to parse the response, or we just return this response we got. So return server response object dot data 0 value, attributes value. Okay, so now we want to put this all together. So const value 1 equals API call. So we're going to take the API call. That's going to be, we want to parse that value, JSON parser, and we want to get the value out of it. All right. Has everybody followed me so far? Any questions or comments? Or
Is disrupting that if it does not come back as 200? Or
Yeah.
just-
Here, let's do it this way instead. I shouldn't do console.assert. We'll just do it this way. If response dot status is not equal to 200, throw new error, invalid response code. So we'll use exceptions instead.
And that throw new error will break the loop.
The loop? Yeah, it'll
Oh, right.
it'll peel out. And in fact, yeah. So
Stop the whole chain.
yeah, and I'd like to continue to introduce other potential problems, like maybe half the time this doesn't return 200 code. Maybe half the time the data isn't exactly in the format that we want to. So we have to be a little bit defensive. But let's just get this part done, and we'll get to introducing more potential problems so we can be as realistic as possible. So, all right. So let's just run it. Yeah, I screwed up the JSON. Oh, because I didn't put a brace in front of it. I think that's why. Data needs quotes. Good call. I made all these mistakes so you guys can catch me. Sweet. Look, that's the most complicated way you can get a random number consistently possible. All right, so let's do it twice. We got value 1, we got value 2, and let's sum them together. Sweet. All right, great. So the reality of this is that this actually takes a long time, or you can't do this synchronously, right? We wrote this in just the really brain-dead synchronous approach where everything is just instantaneously being returned. But the truth is that this all takes time. So now we're going to introduce asynchronicity to this whole thing and make it extremely complicated. And we're going to do it in 3 ways. We're going to start with callbacks. We're going to move to promises, and then we're going to move to async and await. So the first thing we want to do is introduce a callback to this thing. And first thing I'm going to do is just copy this off to callbacks1.js. All right, so when something takes a long time to do, we often have it. So okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to say this is going to take a while. So I'm going to use the setTimeout function to introduce asynchronicity. So this is now going to take 500 milliseconds, and bam, there we go. Actually, I need to make this an anonymous function. Here we go. So now this takes time. So what does the API call function return? Yep, it returns undefined. So when I call API call and that returns undefined, JSON parser is going to get nothing, and this is going to break immediately. So we run this, and it's unhappy. It can't find response.status. So response.status doesn't exist because the API call function no longer returns anything. How do we deal with this situation? Yeah. Yeah. So let's pass it a function. So now we can go call instead of a return inside here because nobody cares about the return of setTimeout. So I'm going to do callback of this instead. And ESLint's mad because it doesn't like the callback. I don't know why. Doesn't like the term callback. No callback literal. No, don't. Sorry?
The first part, like the slash, the standard.
Oh yeah, thank you. Don't worry, we won't be using this in the future. Okay.
You mean the callback pattern, like the?
I think it just doesn't like the actual term callback. It wants it something else. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why exactly. I haven't taken the time to look at it because I don't use callbacks very much. So how do we? So let's pull this stuff apart down here before we get going, and just into its component parts, just so we can get at it a little better. So we're going to say, So value equals API call. So like this is response 1 equals API call, and then we're going to be like parsed data equals JSON parser of response 1, parse data 1, and then we're going to be like I guess random number 1 equals get the value of parse data 1. All right. So I'm just gonna let this stuff be cool. Okay, and then console.log random1. All right. So how do we finish the job here? So we've now changed API call, so it needs to take a callback. Let's.
And we want to pull the data out of the callback.
Yeah, we still want this whole thing to happen, right? We still want.
And so in our callback, we want to be able to pull the JavaScript data.
Still want to parse.
Data
We still.
from that object.
Yeah, we still want to parse it. We still want to get the value of it. How do we change this code so this still works? You have some ideas, Chris?
So I'm just reading the full.
So when
Okay.
API, we're gonna have to, like in the API call, we have to put in a function,
Yeah, we have to give it a function, exactly.
right? I guess we could create a function if we wanted to, or you just do it synchronous.
Yeah.
I don't know what would be better in this.
I think it's always readable.
So there's a function that can then retrieve the information that is in there?
There's a function that can retrieve.
We just give it JSON parser. We just need to start writing a new function inside API.
Let's write a dang function.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the first part of that, it needs to take in one argument, right? It needs to take in
Response.
response. Because that's what callback is doing up there. It's calling the function that we give it with one argument, which is that dictionary.
Yep. Right. So this between these two braces is the response. So we're going to take this function out. It might be a little more straightforward if we call this function something.
It's not really cyclical though.
It's not cyclical because we're simply passing it a function.
Yeah, we're not running that function right away.
We don't do it more than once.
Could we, I'm sorry, could we just rename callback to like future function or something ridiculous? Just to like.
It's not really a future function.
Well, I just think like the word callback is like too generic.
Okay.
It makes sense. At least be more like readable.
I mean, let's look at it this way. So let's say if I define a function foo, it's going to take a callback, and I'm just going to say callback 12 or 120. Done. So function foo takes a callback, and it calls it back with that value. Then I go foo, I'm going to hand it a function. Okay, and I could hand it console.log, for example. I'm just going to hand it that function, and it's going to, and it goes, okay, console.log. I got console.log. I'm going to plug it in here. Console.log 120. I just printed 120. And I can go foo of value, value plus 100. Sorry. I think I did too many close parentheses. But I should console.log that. Oh, I did it wrong. What am I doing wrong here? Let's do foo value console.log value plus 100. There we go. So I can hand it whatever function I want to. I can give it the function itself here, or I can give it a little anonymous function that it can run, and it'll do whatever I want. I can make it a great big function. I can go, function my super great callback value.
I just don't get it's like, so the one here is food value and then console value plus 100, and then the top one.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship between those two is confusing me. Like,
this, sorry. So this is a function. And console.log by itself is also a function. It's actually a function. Yeah, it's a function. So I can hand it console.log, and it can plug it in there and run it.
should they just exchange parameters? So like this one where you call foo gives that one the actual function, but the top one gives the value down to the anonymous function inside?
I didn't quite follow your question. Say that again.
It's like they swap information basically?
We're passing a function as a parameter.
You're passing the whole function.
You're telling foo what function to call with that parameter.
The only part that's confusing, to be honest, honestly, is like how the hell does value? How does value then reverse read or something? Like you know what I'm saying? It's like they change. It's like they trade information.
I mean, we're calling callback with 120. So basically, 120 is going to get put in here in the place of value, and then we're going to log it out. So the other way of doing it, we can make a big function like this. I mean, the other way to, instead of using an anonymous function, maybe it's clearer if I do it this way. So console.log value plus 100. So there's another way of defining a function. My super great callback is a function. And if I call my super great callback with 100, I'm going to get 200. Like, we've done that all day long. So now I can go foo of my super great callback, and it operates the same way. Because I've defined foo in such a way that it takes whatever callback I give it and hands 120 to it as an argument. So I can define it anonymously, or I can define it with a named way, but these are equivalent. This is the essence of functional programming, where we get used to passing functions around as arguments to things. So when we do that for each, or when we do that map, we give it a function, right? And it's gonna, as an argument, we gave it, we've been doing this a lot. We've been doing var mylist equals 1, 2, 3, 4, mylist dot reduce. What mylist dot reduce takes is a function, right? We've been going, okay, total current, return total plus current start at 0. And I just added all the values up. So the argument to mylist.reduce, you've been doing this for a while and you didn't even know it. The argument to mylist.reduce is a function. That's basically a callback. Right? So it's just going to call this callback every time for every value in the list. That's a callback. It's really not any different than this. We've just now been a little bit more explicit. We've now created a function that takes a function as an argument. And all it's going to do is the most simple thing. It's just going to call your function with a value, and that's it.
So can I add something? It doesn't really change anything, but
Sure.
go back up to your original callback function.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were used to seeing that in, say, the code block, that would be everything the same except you would have a return statement after the first left bracket, or after the first left bracket, right? So it'd be return callback 120. But no,
We don't know what callback returns. So
you're defining it as returning 120.
no, I'm only so in this case, console.log doesn't return anything, right? So we're taking this function, we're calling it with the value of 120. We don't care what console log returns. I mean, console log might return something, and it might not. But really, the purpose of the function pointer is simply to call it. It sort of lets, in general, it's used as like a way of letting us know when something's done. So we're going to, in this case, or in the iterable case, it actually is important. So in this case, it actually is important what something returns, because we use that to build up a new list, or to reduce it down to one value. So yeah, in some cases it matters what the callback returns. In some cases it doesn't. In this particular case it doesn't. And in the case where,
So could you say it's essentially performing 3 different operations in that first? Sorry.
go back to this code, sure.
I don't know if you would say 3, but yeah, I guess I'm just a little unused to seeing the final callback parents 120.
I mean, I could have, maybe it would be clearer if I did it in one line.
Yeah.
So var, so var bar, or actually I'll just go function bar equals, no, sorry, function bar callback 120. That's all it is. So now if I go bar of 1, sorry, if I go bar of 1, what will that do? That will error, because 1 is not a function. I can't go 1 of 120. That doesn't make sense. But I go bar of console.log, and it'll print it. It'll use that console.log as the function that's getting called back. Okay. And I can put whatever function in there I want to, but it's got to be a function. It can't be a scalar of some kind.
Scalar.
Scalar.
What do you mean in this context?
A scalar is just like a primitive value, like a string, or a number, something without any complex functionality. Sorry. So if I pass it a simple primitive value like this, like bar of 1, it doesn't know what to do with that because I can't call 1. I've got to be able to call it. Whatever I pass into bar has got to be. I got to be able to go console.log open close. If I can't put the open close parenthesis at the end of it, it's not a function, right? So if I go const my primitive callback equals, now I've turned it into a function. That does absolutely nothing, but I can call it. It's like, okay, great, I don't care. But now I can go bar of my primitive callback. It's like, sure, I'll take that. I didn't error. It didn't give me my primitive callback is not a function. called it, and my primitive callback just threw it away, which is fine.
This is called functional programming.
This is the heart of functional programming, is passing around functions as arguments to other functions.
I love the name. Because I'm running. It's a Russian dolls. This is Matryoshka
Sure.
programming. Function is too vague, I think. But semantics are important. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is done all the time in JavaScript. This callback passing stuff. This is very, very common. This isn't like cutting edge JavaScript stuff. So the question is then, if I'm going to use, and let's take a break in 5 minutes just so you can rest your brains for a second. But let's get through this part of it here. If we're now going to pass a function into API call, so that we can do something with the value, I'm just going to go ahead and code it up. We now have a response. We're then basically going to take this stuff and shove it in here, right? So now,
And like log a random number.
yeah, and then log rand number, exactly. Console.log rand number. I'm sorry, say again? Oh yeah, still parse data. You're right. Well, it doesn't matter because it's got less scope. But yeah, now it's going to be more interesting when we want to add two things together,
Yeah.
because we have to do the API call again. So one thing we could do.
Well, you could. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say you could just, if you knew how many you wanted, like only two, you could break off the API call again and return something.
You
Like
can
make a second API call.
Sure.
And just have it return the value.
API call
Oh god.
response 2. Great, let's go.
Yeah, and then what is that?
And take some more of this crap. Stick it in here. This is parse data 2 now. Response 2. Rand number 2. Console.log. Random number 1 plus random number 2. Super delightful. So you can see this, if we kept going with this, it starts indenting and indenting and indenting.
Silliness.
And that's called the pyramid of doom in general. Let's see. I want to close there. I want to close there. Yeah, it's called the callback pyramid of doom, and everybody kind of hates it. But it's
You definitely just call that one callback first.
sure, absolutely. So this is callbacks.js. So, and you could see it took a second, right? Because each of those calls to API call took 500 milliseconds to complete. And so, you know, we talked about the event loop before, like it executed all this code immediately. But then the timeout had to wait, and so after 500 milliseconds passed, it called the callback. So we got into this code, and then it called API call again, and then had to wait for the 500 milliseconds for the response 2 to call. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute. Okay, let's get started. Let's continue. So in the real world, bad things happen, and they don't. So like the set timeout doesn't always complete. So sometimes it'll actually fail, and we need to handle that kind of stuff. So yeah, it gets worse. So in general, you need to pass 2 callbacks. Here's a callback if everything works. Here's a callback if things don't work. So let's simulate sort of a flaky API or a real world API, but let's make it flakier than normal so we can experience what happens when the bad things inevitably do happen. So let's say half of the time this fails, and let's just find a const failure rate equals 0.5, and let's go. Let's make a little function. Failure. So maybe we'll call it maybe fail. So maybe fail. Half the time is going to throw an exception. So if math dot random is greater than is less than failure rate, throw new error. Bad stuff happened. And then we'll go in here, try. Catch. Okay. Maybe fail. Error. Stuff broke. Any questions or comments about that? Looks like I did something wrong.
I feel a little confused about why the made a function to decide whether or not it would fail, but why did it get run? Why did you run that in the try?
Why did I run it in the try? Okay. If I didn't run it in the try, what would happen? So let's take it out of the try. If I take it out of the try, I lose the catch altogether. So if this fails, so half the time it's going to throw an error. If it fails, what happens? While it's inside the set timeout, what's going to happen if it throws an exception?
There's nothing to catch the error, so it's just going to stop the program.
Yeah, what it says is true. Like the error callbacks never need a call.
So throw new error is actually throwing it's like if you're running something in the terminal and there's an error, it raises an error and shuts down everything.
Yeah, everything peels out. You're done, right? So anytime an exception is called, let's go play with it in the REPL for a second.
So that then it doesn't shut everything down.
Yes. So I go try. So I go. Let's see. I go function. Bad function. Console.log. Hello. Throw new error. Oops. That's so bad. Hello there. All right. Bad function. Bam. It didn't get to there. So I can go function not as bad function. Okay. We can go console.log hello. Try. Console.log there. Throw new error. Oops. Console.log e. Catch e. Console.log. I tried, but it didn't work out. Okay, so now I go not as bad function. It looks, actually, maybe I shouldn't have printed the error that I caught. But it goes hello in there. It raises, we didn't see we happen. And then we caught it and we printed it. It didn't actually accept. We just printed the exception. It's hard to tell the difference.
If you did another console log after the catch block, it would.
Yeah, exactly. If you did another console log after the catch block, that would have also worked. That would have been a better example. So anyway, this is just how general error handling is.
You don't have to say what type of error it is in the catch.
Nope, you don't.
Whatever it caught, it will.
Yeah, and error handling is not as nice as it is in Python. when you can define your own errors and you can catch certain kinds of errors and not other kinds of errors.
Oh, you can't like
You can't do that.
catch an index error or anything?
Nope. Nope.
Interesting. Is there like a canonical way of like, testing that you've got the right error?
You can poke at it with a stick, you know, if it's got a, sometimes you have a message. I think
Like,
E
it
has
doesn't
a,
like return anything or like,
no. This is probably the one way where JavaScript sucks compared to Python. The one way, well, adding lists also suck. I guess I'll say that too. This is still my most hated JavaScript feature. So those two ways, JavaScript sucks compared to Python. Anyway, so you see, like in this case, since we're inside a timeout and we're no longer like in the normal path of execution, if that peels out, if that maybe fail peels out, we have no recourse from our API call. From our API call, all we gave it was a callback when things work. We have no recourse when things don't work. So to give ourselves some recourse, typically things that can break, you give it two callbacks, one for the happy path and one for the not happy path. And then, so in our set timeout, we need to be able to either call the good case or the bad case, depending on if the worst happens or not. So now we're going to call the error callback with, you know, oops, it didn't work out. So then in our case here, we have to pass it two functions. All right? The first function is when everything works. That's this thing. Okay, but then get a load of this. Comma. Here's the other callback. Error string. Console dot.
This is so unreadable.
Yeah, it's the worst. Look what happened. Yeah. So, and if we were going to do that properly, we'd also do it for this call.
You need two.
Yeah, exactly. It's so bad. Yeah, it's super terrible. So we are going to get something to the rescue here in just a second, but I want you all to see how bad this is.
If you were trying to do it recursively with error handling,
Yeah, it'd be even harder.
that would be okay.
and then without being able to catch.
Okay, so, and look what happened. Hopefully so on the inside, maybe eventually it'll work. It's not very good odds. Oh, okay, that time it worked. So yeah, so we have a functioning system now. It's just nasty. All right, so let's talk about promises. Promises come to the rescue to some degree. Not entirely, it's still a little bit, it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good solution. So a promise is something I can hand you that will eventually turn into the thing you want. So a promise has an interesting API. So we can make promises. So we can go const foo, or my promise equals promise dot resolve 1. So if I look at my promise, it's a promise object. You don't really.
You didn't have to say new.
Maybe I should have. I don't think you. No. Oh, sorry. Let my promise 2. It works with it. No, it doesn't take new. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. Yes, you don't say new. It's just promise.resolve. So if you want to make a resolved promise, so now we have a thing that's a promise, my promise, and it's got a then method to it, and the then you get to use to look at what it resolves to when it eventually resolves. So again, this is kind of like a callback. Value, console.log value. Oh, I guess that's the logged output. That was a little weird.
It's like
It's like this is the return
yeah,
of
that's what
this
my
thing.
notes will
Yeah.
return. That's-
exactly. So what's kind of cool about this is that you can so okay, let's just there's a number of ways of constructing a promise. I constructed it in the simplest possible way there, where I said, I did a promise.resolve. So that was like immediately resolve the promise. You can have a promise that's sort of immediately rejected as well. So bad promise equals promise.reject. Bad news. All right, and then I guess I can't really. Is this thing still okay? That's cool. So I've got this bad promise. If I try to call .then on it, it won't work because it got rejected. So this is not going to happen.
Could you just put console.log.value?
Yes. Yeah. I was hoping somebody would catch on to that. Yes. There's no reason. There's no reason to use this construct. I could just pass console.log, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't work because it was rejected. So there's another method that you use on a promise when it's rejected. Bad promise.catch. So if it's rejected, you do it this way, console.log. So then we got the bad news out of it.
And if you
Yep.
put a catch at the very end of like a chain of thens, will
Right.
it catch any in that chain?
It sure will. So you can go bad promise .then. So here's what happens in the good case. And let's dress it up a little bit. Value console.log. Okay. Value .catch. Value. I don't really have to put the frames around. Console.log. Not okay. Value. Okay, so it goes directly to the catch case. So we can build we can use this API to make slightly more complicated things. We can go so maybe promise equals new promise. So when we do it this way, again, do I have the new? I don't think I do have the new. All right, sorry. We can give it a function which takes two results, a resolve method, resolve callback, and a JS. Okay, let's just do this again without screwing around so much. And we got all this nonsense. Nonsense. Okay. Why do we have? Okay, and then we go maybe promise dot then value okay value dot catch console.log not okay value. All right, let's try running that thing. Node test promise. I guess I do need a new here. I can never remember. Why does it mad about reject? Oh, it prefers throw. There. Yeah. You can reject with whatever value you want.
One more. It's pretty simple. So right.
It's not throw, it's just new error. Yeah. All right, and then here. Okay, good. Not okay, error bad. I don't want to print it.
Okay, cool. So can we
Sorry. Yes?
just talk about this again?
Yes, let's talk about.
Or give it back?
Are they?
You can call those whatever you want.
So they're positional then.
They're positional. You can call this yeah and nope.
They're just there and you're giving them variables, so you can
Yeah.
go down here.
Standard hates you when you do this. It'll say like, no, they must be called resolve and reject. But that's just a convention. But you don't have to do that. It will still work.
And then resolve and reject themselves are essentially objects to take the parameter what you want to go out.
The functions.
Functions.
They're callback functions.
They're callbacks.
Okay. And then okay, so the then catcher methods. as
Then
well.
and catch our methods on a promise. Okay, that's where we're going next. We're going to fix this callbacks to turn it into a promise-based API instead of a callback-based API. So, so let's rename this callbacks to promises. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That was a fun question.
Sorry.
That's all right. All right. So yes, let's do this with promises instead. So how would we do this with a promise? We want API call. Let's just talk about how we want API call to work. API call is now going to return a promise. So we're going to go API call, but instead of passing it a function, we're going to go .then and .catch. So now the code that went in here is going to go into the .then instead.
And then you can just chain .thens instead of having that like recursive.
Right, we can do that, yeah. So we're going to go response, SPONSE. So far it's not like much better. Like, okay, it's just in a different spot. Right. And then we want another one. Put this up here. So, okay, then we actually want to deal with the error version, so let's do that. So this is error. Just copy this. Okay, so now that's sort of the canonical promise method. And then we want to do it again. So we're going to go API call.
Well, can we just?
Oh man, don't give it away. Yes, we'll get there. There's actually something awesome about promises that you don't know, but we'll get there. All right, so so then we just kind of keep on going. Response to, and here's our callback when things work out okay. And it's going to be, ugh, still kind of sucks. All right, and then we can go console.log rand number 1 plus rand num 2. And then we can go, look how great this is. All right. Okay, and this is error 2. Error 2. Okay, cool. So this is the promisey version. So this is a kind of a promisey callback pyramid of doom. Callback hell. Let's see if it works. So node promises.js. Nope, it doesn't. What did I do wrong? I forgot to actually implement it. Good point. Okay, let's implement it. Yes, so we know we need to return a promise. That's what this has to do with a resolve and a reject. Okay, so how do we make this happen?
You could start by putting all the code.
Let's just shovel all this code in there. Blump.
So you need to like separate the resolve first.
Okay,
So I guess like from set timeout all the way before the catch.
it's kind of here for us anyway already, isn't it? We have callback and we have error. So that just turns into resolve and reject. And we should be doing this properly with a new error. Okay, that's basically it. We just promisified this thing.
And then you need the try catch.
How, if we don't do the try catch,
Shouldn't it just go to, oh, then they're like the same level.
how are we going to know to call reject?
Well, shouldn't that happen if like the server has it?
Should it?
Oh, I guess not.
Yeah, it's just going to get swallowed. All right, so there's the promisey version. Let's see if it works. I still screwed it up. Undefined is not a promise. Do I need to say new? I can never remember. Let's see what kind of programmer I am. Oh, that works. Okay, so we logged it twice. Hopefully it's going to break sometimes. Good. Breaks, 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 breaks a lot. And then sometimes it works. Okay, so that's great. I mean, hopefully you're not convinced yet that promises are a good thing. That's actually not that awesome. It's kind of the same deal. So one thing that's kind of cool is that promises can return promises. So rather than a promise just returning you a thing, a promise can return you a promise for a thing, and you can chain them. You can chain them up. So let's see if I can show you how awesome this is. So inside the maybe promise, I could return you another promise. I could return maybe promise. Is this going to work? Might. What's this called? Test promise. So that worked. So when we chain these, so what happens, it's a little hard to describe. Maybe I can use the whiteboard for a second. If the return promises that anytime something, the inside of a promise can return either a new promise or a value, and it will always be caught by subsequent thens. So we can do a then value console.log okay value. So most of the time it's not going to work, and then sometimes it will. So we chained those promises, and we can do it over and over and over and over again. And we should make the percentage failure small. Oh, because I did this wrong. Sorry. I want to chain the promises. So I made the percentage that it's going to fail small enough that it got through all those maybe promises and eventually got to this then and did a console log of okay. So we can return a maybe promise, or we can just return, we could also return 22. Sorry, I should do this a little bit differently so it's more obvious. So what will this print? Assuming it doesn't crash with the rejects. Sorry, did I hear something?
Okay, 22.
Yeah, it'll say OK 22 because it doesn't care what the result of maybe promise was. It ignored the return, the resolve. So this resolves with good. That's great. It doesn't actually care. It's just going to resolve with 22. So this will replace the value of whatever maybe promise returned. So maybe promise kept on returning 22. Nobody cared because at the end we just returned 22, and so it just prints 22 if it gets that far. So at any point you can return a promise, or you can return a real thing, or you can take whatever you were given, value, and you can return something based on that. To value to be true. Okay, and there's the value that was returned by maybe promise, and we just threw it in there and changed it around. Too good to be true.
Maybe I missed this, but if you don't return anything in a then statement, can you continue training thens?
Good question. All right, so if you don't return, let's just say
so for instance, like
console.log yo, for example.
For example, amendments, and then you want to like append your own stuff after. That was like
That's a weird example.
a weird example. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm just trying to think of something where like you wouldn't return anything but still want to do stuff.
Well, here's an example.
Okay.
All right, I'm not returning from here anymore. What will this print?
Well, that next then is going to fail, right?
Because like there's no value.
It's not going to fail because I didn't raise an exception.
Okay.
What's that?
Yeah, but that's
Okay,
not,
undefined.
that's
Okay.
never returning a promise, and so it's not going to have a dot.
Every function implicitly returns undefined if you don't say. So that's going to return OK undefined. So value isn't being returned any longer from line 18. So that returns undefined, OK undefined. Still passes through. This is a very common mistake, actually, not to remember to return something.
Then you can return value there, and it will return
Yeah.
under.
Exactly. If you did value here, then it's a happy story again. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. How can we make this better? The answer is return API call instead of calling it, and then you can .then it here with response to. I mean, it's not great, but it's better. At least it's flat and simple, and you only have one catch. And it's a lot more readable, right? API call, then process it. API call again, process that response. I now have both numbers. Well, do I have both numbers? Maybe not. This random number might actually not make it down here. We might need to do a little bit of tomfoolery. Let's see if that might not work. So node promises. Oops, I have to have a syntax error. 63. What did I do wrong? Response to. There's my catch. There's my then. Oh, right. I didn't close this out. Yeah, and sure enough, Linter's like, hey, you didn't use random number up here, and where the heck did random number come from down there? So, can anybody think of a way to fix this?
You could like give it with the return API, and then
Just define random 1 and 2 outside.
Yeah, we can make it a closure.
just so
It was, yeah. Maybe there's a more sophisticated way to do it.
would you not return it though? Like along with API call? You can array or something or an object.
There is a more sophisticated way to do this, but I'm not sure how you would. So you mean like
Well, since we
Random.
only have 2 API calls, if we had like a con, I would say like that being terrible.
Are you thinking like that?
Yeah.
I don't think you can combine. You either have to return a promise or a primitive.
Oh.
You can't do both. There is a more elegant way to do this, and I'll go ahead and do it in a second. So now we just don't define it there, and this should all work out. And sure enough, maybe eventually it'll work. There it goes. Okay, so hopefully this looks a little bit more streamlined. There's another approach you could do. There's some kind of fun tricks you can do with promises. You can do a promise.all. API call, API call. .then, value 1, value 2. It wants parens. Then you just like, let's do it. Parse data 1. I should call this response 1, I guess. Response 2. Response 1.
Let's see how you would make that, like, get an arbitrary number of numbers, right?
Do that as many times as you want, and then
So you just like make it, like what you showed me earlier, what's called the spread. Spread operator, and then just do a for loop through.
Yep.
number and then-
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that'd be fun to do that with this example. So parse data 1. Why is it mad about this? Oh, I didn't do an open brace. Okay, random number 1. I already have the thing here. Bam, bam. That might work.
It needs
Oops,
response.
did I do something dumb? I don't think I did anything dumb.
Oh no, you're right.
See if eventually it works. Internet is really unreliable today. I think there's a little bit more stuff added to them. Let's look at one. Response 1. So it's not really passing our parse. Yeah. So it's got. Oh.
It's got all the responses in one.
It's got all the responses. Okay.
So you have to do-
All right. So we're just going to go responsive. We're just going to go straight to the better solution. Responses. For responses dot let responses dot reduce. Let's not mess around. That's right. All right, give us some of these. That's going to be a response now. It's going to be parse data. Bam, and then we're just going to go start at 0. Oh, this is a total. And we're going to go return total plus random number. Const output equals console log output. Oh. Console log response. All right. It didn't quite work, did it? It's not what I wanted. So this data structure is a list of responses. Let's see if I can. That's working. Okay.
What was the issue with the spread there?
I had to throw it in a.
Oh, okay.
In the
That's
brackets.
what
All right, so that's working 100% of the time. We're feeling pretty smart about it right now. We're going to take out the maybe fail. And then sometimes, well, we have a low percentage. Bump this back up to that. Come on. So basically, it should be like a 1 in 4 chance. Man. Okay, we just got really unlucky. So that works. Great. Now, the reality of the situation is also that some of these other things often take time. So sometimes these also need to be done, inside a promise. In fact, that's how the API works. The JSON parser takes a little while, and so it doesn't resolve synchronously. So we also have to go, return, if we're going to actually simulate the API properly, resolve reject. Is it new? I can never remember. Is it new? Yeah, it is new. All right, thank you.
It wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird API. All right, and so in this case, we're going to reject, and we're going to resolve. Oops. And then this is an anonymous function. All right, that looks cool. So JSON parser is now asynchronous, and let's actually make it more asynchronous. So we'll go set timeout. Just to prove that it's asynchronous. And we'll give it a quick return. So now when we call JSON parser, we can't do it this way anymore. So how do we deal with this? So I'm kind of wanting to jump to the next better solution, but because this is going to get a little ugly. Let's see. What is a good way to do this? So first of all, JSON parser has, okay, I guess it's not that bad. That then. Yeah, it's not that fun. Yeah. Parse data, so this is parse data. Okay, that's great. But then how do we deal with the fact that we're in the middle of a reduce, right? That sucks. Okay, we can make a map. So this is the problem is this returns promises now. So we can do, let's try this. Promises all. Return promises.all of, and we're going to make a map now. I hope everybody's following me. Response. Yes, response. Return. All right. How do you like that? So now we have a bunch of resolved JSON parsed responses. And then we can .then that stuff. So this is parsed data. Anybody lost? Anybody not lost? It's gross. Yeah, it's totally gross. And we're gonna. So as bad as callbacks were, this is better. I hope everybody kind of agrees this is better. The next thing is going to be even way better. It's going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe we were screwing with promises or any of that stuff. And that's async and await. But I just kind of wanted to give you a taste of how terrible this could be. So All right, so it'd be fun if we could get through this example, though. So we've resolved all the API calls. We have responses. We're now going to go through all the responses, and we're going to parse them. So then we have parsed data. Now we want to reduce the parsed data, right? Yeah, parsed data dot reduce, and we have a
Can I ask a question before we continue?
sure.
The
Oh, thank you. That's great.
spread.
Appreciate it. I'm sorry?
So the spread with like the parsed data,
Yeah.
are we just getting all of that in a huge array? Yeah. Okay.
We're getting a
map. We're doing promise on all the array of JSON parser returns with the promises in those returns.
yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So then we want to get the value on each of those and sum them together. So parse data list, I guess this might be a little more straightforward. And so we're going to parse data, and now we're going to get the value. We're going to initialize this with 0, and we're going to, this is a total, comma, parse data, and now we're going to return total plus get the value of the thing. And I don't know what the heck this is anymore. Adios. Okay. So also, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is rather than chaining these thens in a pyramid of doom, I can just return them, and then I can, and then it flips back to the bottom of the chain, right? So I've returned all the promises. Now I've got a list of I've got a parsed data list. I want to return the reduced thing. So then at the end of this all this business, I should be able to do a .then console log. Does that make sense? Maybe I shouldn't skip straight to that. I can go final value. Console.log final value. So again, I'm using this feature of being able to return either a promise, so this returns a promise, promise.all returns a promise, JSON parser returns a promise. So JSON parser is returning a promise that feeds up to promise.all. I'm returning the promise of promise.all, so that promise resolves when all of these JSON parser promises also resolve. So that'll take me to the next then. I then now have a bunch of parsed data in the list. I'm then going to return, I'm going to reduce this down by just adding all the values from the parsed data. So we're just going to pull out the server response object data 0 attributes value. I'm going to return that, and now I'm not returning a promise anymore. I'm returning just a number. But that's okay. We can deal with numbers just as well as we deal with promises. So that number gets popped out of this then to the final value. I just log it. And if there's any justice in the world, it will work. Let's see. Oh.
Yes, exactly. You should never say that.
What is that?
What does that even mean? All right, so what did I do wrong? I've got all kinds of syntax errors, I guess. So let's see. That looks okay. That looks okay. That doesn't look okay. Why is that angry? Oh, promise.all. Ah, wait a minute here. Okay.
Oh, you need one more for map, I think.
Yeah, let's see. I'm mapping. In fact, I think I just wanted to do this on one line, so it's a little clearer. Promise.all. Okay, that looks cleaner. Holy smokes. Yeah, okay, that works. So, yeah, there we go. I'll put this up into, maybe I should put both versions. The one where I screwed it up with all the nasty extra API calls, or the extra promising, and then one before it. So promises are not that great, but better. Okay. One of the things that makes us sad about promises in general, at least this kind of asynchronous programming, is that we had to rework all of our code when something went asynchronous. You know, before it was just like call the thing, deal with the output, and then go to the next step. But now, anytime something becomes asynchronous and we have promises involved, I mean, what was a pretty simple, straightforward set of code here has now become really overwrought and nasty. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to write asynchronous code in a similar way to synchronous code? If we could just like put in some magic sauce that says, you know, when something takes a while, just go do it and come back to me with the results when it's done. And there is such a thing. It's called async and await. And I'm not sure I really have time to go over it tonight. So we might want to pause here. I don't know if I want to get like, yeah, I don't know if we want to get into it just yet. What ends up happening is anytime something, 15 minutes. I guess what I'd like you to do is play with this code as it is. Like play around with the callback version of this thing. Play around with the promises. You know, break it. You know, add more levels of failure. You know, get this to work on your own systems. Really understand promises and callbacks. Just because async and await have solved a lot of these problems doesn't mean you don't have to know this. Underneath, async and await still deal with promises. So you still have to know the promises API. Callbacks are still used everywhere. As you can see, I'm still using callbacks. So callbacks are still something you have to learn. Async and await will make your life easier so that you're never going to have to write code like this again, hopefully. So async and await is going to clean all this up. But still, at the very top of this chain, we're still going to have promises. So it's important to know promises. So what I'd like you to do is spend some time with this code. There's also a really good article out there called There is a Problem with Promises. We have a problem with promises. And I want you all to read this for homework. Because I want you all to I want to make sure that you all understand the difference between these four promise statements. These all do something different. And until you understand what's different between these four statements, you don't understand promises.